What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. This is one of my core plays for week 7 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. If this is your first time here, my name is Chris Pinnell, and I break down NFL DFS each and every single week on this channel. What I like to do in these videos is go position by position with the small player pool that I have as my cores. Then we'll allow us to progress through it more so for a single entry tournament build. Then at the end are my optimizers to see who's popping the most with the current projections and ownership projections that I have in place. If that all sounds good to you, we're going to be one small thing in return. So leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'm more than happy to get back to you. And as always, if you ever have any interest on the screen behind me, it's available completely free for a week over on my Patreon. Links down below in the description or the pinned comment for that. You get projections for both sites, the entire slate statted out. So projected stats, not just their actual numbers on the season, so you can use that for props or whatever it may be. And we do have all the statistics for the season, color code nice and neat, so it's really easy to follow. The Vegas data, matchup info, all of that fun stuff. My cheat sheet going over cash games, tournaments, optimizer, ownership projections, and my Discord that's popping all the time. So if you want to come in, check it out, be my guest, I would love to have you. If you don't like it after your week trial, how many kick rocks, I don't care either way. All right, so let's get into it here. I want to start off by saying this slate is just not very good. Our highest total game is at 47.5 for those Chargers in Kansas City game. And then after that, we're looking at a bunch of low 40s to mid 40s. We do have a 45 there, the Green Bay and Denver game, but I mean, the two teams that are Green Bay and Denver, it's just gross. So not a whole lot to like here. Now, the best game of the week is the Sunday night game with the Dolphins facing off versus the Eagles. That'll be a fun watch, 51.5 point over under. Unfortunately, that is not on the main slate. So we are left with what we have, and we will try to work through it. So let's start at the quarterback position, and as I always say, this is going to be a very important part because this will give us the entire direction of our lineup. Because if I want to get an expensive running back this week, well, I probably can't play Patrick Mahomes, because if I play Patrick Mahomes and we do the typical build style that I do for single entries, which is 2 pass catching options and a run back, doesn't have to exactly be that, but in the ballpark, that means I have to play Travis Kelce. He's $8,000. And popular run back on the Chargers is going to be Keenan Allen. He's almost $9,000. Now, I can always play Joshua Palmer, but either way, I'm still eating up a good chunk of my salary. So that's something to keep in mind this week, depending on what kind of skill position players you want to play outside of your stacks. But let's talk about this Kansas City-Los Angeles game here first. We have Mahomes facing Justin Herbert. Mahomes would be the preferred option, and they're both very similarly priced. Now, over on FanDuel, Herbert might be a bit of a better value because he's $1,000 cheaper, but the matchup is a bit tougher, and the implied team total is definitely in the Kansas City Chiefs' favor here. They come in as 5.5 point favorites at home in Arrowhead with their 26.5 implied team total. And the Chargers, 5.5 point dogs on the road with only a 21 point implied team total, which I honestly thought was a bit low, but I realized on the road in Arrowhead with their defense, they've been playing pretty solid so far this season. I guess I understand it. They are allowing the 6th fewest points per game to quarterbacks. Meanwhile, the Chargers allowing the most points per game to quarterbacks. So you get the best quarterback in football going against the defense that's worse in the league right now versus fantasy quarterbacks, allowing over 300 passing yards per game. I am fine with both options, although Mahomes is definitely the safer option. So if you were playing cash games, is definitely looking like one of the top options, because outside of these two guys, there's not really anybody else I like. And I don't even really like Justin Herbert that much at his price point on DraftKings FanDuel. It's a little bit easier. Both are fine. Both have very similar numbers this year, 1.8 touchdowns per game, both right around 265 passing yards, so very similar. But I do prefer the Chiefs side here as they have a bit of an easier matchup. If you want to save a little bit of money and get a quarterback with some rushing upside, we have Lamar Jackson at $7,600 taking on the Detroit Lions, and they're pretty mid-packish versus quarterbacks this year, but Lamar Jackson's floor with his rushing upside is always going to be the main appeal here, averaging over 50 rushing yards per game and nearly 0.7 rushing touchdowns. That's a very nice baked-in floor. What he can just do on the ground, then whatever he does through the air is going to be an added bonus, which is right around 200 yards per game and pretty hit or miss on the passing touchdown, but they don't really throw the ball too much, which is pretty much to be expected of the Baltimore Ravens. We know they're a very run-oriented team, so I'm fine with Lamar in GPPs, even in cash games, I guess, because he can run the ball, and the quarterback situation on this slate is not that great. So honestly, I would say pretty much everybody on here is viable for cash games, but I'm not like over the moon about the Baltimore-Detroit game. But that's just because the lower over-under at 43.5. But at the same time, when you look at these other games, I mean, everybody else is around 40, 43 points anyway, so I'm not going to complain too much. Lamar is totally fine. Matthew Stafford at $6,500. I think this is one of the better tournament plays on the slate here, because I'm not really sure how many people are going to want to go with the passing attack for the Rams, because I do think Zach Evans will pick up some ownership. And I do have some concerns with Zach Evans this week. I'll talk about him at the running back position, but the passing attack here is in a very good spot at home versus Pittsburgh. They're 19th versus quarterbacks, but they're 29th versus wide receivers. And it's really easy to stack Stafford and like a sense of you know where the ball is going to go. It's not spread out like the Chiefs. Like outside of Kelsey, you have no idea where that ball is going. Justin Herbert spreads the ball out a little bit outside of Keenan Allen. But with Stafford, it's going to Cooper Kupp. It is going to Puka Nacua. Those are your two main targets there. They throw the ball a ton, 35 times per game. Not completing too many passes this year, right around 60% of the time, but getting Cooper Kupp back, I'm sure will help that at least a little bit. He's in nearly 300 passing yards per game, currently at 280. Does have a few games over 300 this season. It's just the touchdowns haven't really been there, but with a lack of run game potentially this week, they could just be throwing the ball a lot, and this is definitely a good spot for it versus Pittsburgh's defense. Geno Smith, I loved him earlier in the week. The only problem with Geno is that I love Kenneth Walker, and if I play Kenneth Walker, correlation-wise, it doesn't make too much sense to have a ton of Geno Smith. So I would say in my non-Ken Walker lineups, I'll be playing a good chunk of Geno, and then in my non-Geno lineups, I'll have a good chunk of Kenneth Walker, but the Seattle Seahawks have one of the highest implied team totals of the week at 26. It's only 0.5 off the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to put up points. They're at home. Cardinals allowing the 5th most points per game to quarterbacks. Love Geno, love the price tag. Just don't love how he's playing this year, but playing the Arizona defense can certainly fix things. Then if you want a cheap quarterback, we have two here, Jordan Love and Josh Dobbs. It's not going to feel pretty playing either of these guys, especially Josh Dobbs down there. But Jordan Love draws a great matchup versus Denver. They're allowing over 2 passing touchdowns per game. And I believe the second most points per game allowed to quarterbacks this season, right around 23. I know the run defense is awful and everyone wants to play the running backs this week, either Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon, whoever ends up starting. We got to wait on news for Aaron Jones if he's going to be good to go. But he has been practicing in a limited capacity, so I'm assuming he'll be back. But a 23.25 implied team total, that's the exact same as Matthew Stafford's offense and Lamar Jackson. So I think Jordan Love, even though obviously he's not a very good quarterback, completing barely over half his passes this year, and he's near the tops of the league in terms of bad throw percentage. But a matchup versus Denver, I'll take it. On FanDuel, though, I just can't do it. Nearly $8,000 for $200 more. I can play Lamar Jackson, and I would much rather do that. And then Josh Dobbs, if you want to stack this game up, but you want to get off the chalk a little bit and not play Geno Smith, you can pretty much do the exact same thing, but take Geno out and throw in Josh Dobbs. And he offers you rushing upside, right around 30 yards per game. Jordan Love also offers you a little bit of rushing upside, so it gives their floor at least a little bit higher. But I'm fine with Dobbs just because of the matchup. Seattle's pass defense has not been good this year at all. All right, so moving over to our lineup here, I don't really even know who I want to play. Outside of Mahomes, it just doesn't feel good. But I don't want to go with Mahomes here just because, well, he's expensive and I want to try to do something else. So let's go with Lamar Jackson. I actually don't think I've done a Lamar Jackson build yet this year. And don't copy and paste what you see here lineup-wise, guys. I am just simply using the process that I use for all my single entry type builds where I try to do a stack of 2 pass catchers with my quarterback, get a run back option, and then I build from there. And you can apply this same technique, strategy, process, whatever you want to call it, to your own lineups using your own favorite stacks. And I think you'll be well on your way to building very solid single entry type builds. I'm just building this on the fly with the guys we talk about, and Lamar was the first guy that caught my eye, so we're going to roll with a Ravens stack. And moving on to our running backs, I actually think there's a decent amount of options this week. The list might not be as long, but these are pretty solid guys, I think, this week. Not really anybody super expensive, so we're living in that 6 to 7K range. Then we have a couple of flyers in the 5K range, and even a absolute punt option of $4,000 with Zach Evans. So up top, we have Josh Jacobs, who has been horribly inefficient this year, which is kind of out of character for him. But we're going to get all the volume we can handle. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw close to 30 touches for Josh Jacobs in this one. And I do want to mention that Roschon Johnson just got ruled out. So I don't have Deontay Foreman on here. I forget his exact price tag, but that puts him in the player pool just because he's going to get volume. But I'm recording right now, so I can't put him on here just yet. But Josh Jacobs, I mean, you're going to get all the volume you can handle here. 18 carries per game and over 5 targets equates to roughly a 17.5% target share. Quarterback situation looking like Brian Hoyer potentially. Maybe AOC gets the start. I don't think we have any confirmation as of right now, but all that says to me is a heavy dose of Josh Jacobs. Now, if we're looking at his efficiency this year, 2.9 yards per carry. That is terrible. If you think guys like Najee Harris suck or whoever, I mean, Josh Jacobs has been worse in terms of what he's doing per touch compared to actual production overall. But we've seen games where Josh Jacobs has gotten 8 targets, 11 targets. You really can't pass that up versus the Bears defense, who's currently ranked 28th versus running backs. So Josh Jacobs is firmly in play. But I do worry about the Vegas Raiders offense in this one. They only have a 20-point implied team total. And this game should just be very sloppy, but I think Jacobs can fall into the end zone if he gets a massive amount of touches, which he should. Ken Walker is the absolute chalk of the week, facing an Arizona defense who's allowing the 3rd most points per game. 2 fantasy running backs over 100 rushing yards per game, 26-point implied team total, 7.5 point favorite. He's at home. He's probably going to get you 20 touches. There is no better spot than Ken Walker this week. Pretty much reminds me of the Raheem Mostert play of last week, just a little bit more expensive. Aaron Jones, if he ends up playing, is certainly going to be viable for tournaments. We haven't really seen much of him this year. Did smash in that game versus the Chicago Bears. Outside of that, just really hasn't played. I think he was it like week 5 or something. He played 30% of the snaps. But AJ Dillon, I mean, the dude's just absolutely terrible. So hopefully Aaron Jones plays, so we don't have to just jam in AJ Dillon in all of our lineups because the dude just sucks. But we know Aaron Jones can be a bit more efficient and more involved in the passing game, and Denver's allowing by far the most points per game. 2 running backs at over 40 right now, over 130 rushing yards. Just sign me up in tournaments for Aaron Jones, although I wouldn't have like an abundance of him just because it's his first game back, but hopefully they're not rushing him back and he barely plays. Hopefully it's at least just a normal, solid Aaron Jones role where we can have some confidence there. Jahmyr Gibbs at $6,300. I would expect some pretty heavy ownership. David Montgomery's not going to play. Craig Reynolds is banged up. Pretty much everybody's banged up back here. So should be the Jahmyr Gibbs show. And I realize the volume hasn't exactly been there, but just a couple weeks ago, Jahmyr Gibbs had around 20 total opportunities. Forget exactly who that I was against. It was just a couple games ago though. But it looks like we're in line for a decent workload. Now, I'm sure someone random like Craig Reynolds is going to come in and get 20 carries, and we're all going to just be crying tears of why can't we use Jahmyr Gibbs? He's a first-round pick, 12th overall. Why not use the guy? He's not just a change of pace back. Please use him more. But I think we should get 10, 15 carries. We'll have involvement in the passing game on the season, 4.25 targets per game, right around a 14% target share. And in this specific build, as a run back option, Amon-Ra St. Brown's really expensive. So if we don't want to go that route and save some money, we could just play Jahmyr Gibbs because he's going to be involved in the passing game. So he's definitely a decent run back option here as they are road dogs. Isaiah Pacheco, one of my absolute favorite plays on the slate. He is way too cheap at $6,100. If you were the starting running back on the Kansas City Chiefs, who always have one of the highest implied team totals, you have the best quarterback in football, there's always going to be touchdown equity, and you get a really nice matchup versus the Chargers run defense, who's bottom half in the league and has been not very good for a couple of seasons now. 5.5 point favorite, 26.5 implied team total, 4.5 yards per carry. And he is involved in the passing game last week as well versus Denver, getting 6 targets and catching all of them for 6 catches. So yeah, $6,100. Pacheco honestly seems like a pretty easy play here. So I have no issue with him. Definitely finding cash games. Honestly, if you want to just play Pacheco, Gibbs, and Ken Walker in cash this week, that would honestly look really good. Now, I haven't really been playing 3 running backs too often this year, but with Jahmyr Gibbs and his patch catching upside, it's a nice hybrid player there, so I think that would make some sense. Brian Robinson, not too involved in the passing game, only a 6% target share this year, but really nice matchup versus the New York Giants. They're 26 versus running backs, allowing over 100 rushing yards per game. Always going to be a threat around the goal line, and he does have 2 receiving touchdowns this year, despite only getting 2 targets per game. I'm sure that pace won't keep up. Antonio Gibson's more so in that role, but I think he's fine for the matchup this week. Jerome Ford at $5,100, just a little bit too cheap because it's kind of hard to find a running back right around $5,000 that's in a prominent role in his own offense. And Jerome Ford is the starter. I know Kareem Hunt exists. He did score last week, but he outsnapped him, he outtouched him, and he is the better back of the two, averaging around 4 yards per carry, right around 5 yards per carry last week versus the 49ers. I think it's a pretty easy spot versus the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm in on Jerome Ford no matter who the quarterback is. And Zach Evans, while he would seem like an easy play with both Ronnie Rivers and Kyron Williams out, so you'd presume he's the starter. He's only $4,000, and this is definitely an offense that can support a very fantasy relevant running back. And it's a good matchup versus Pittsburgh. But Royce Freeman exists, and they also just activated Darrell Henderson from the practice squad, and we know he has experience in this system already. So while Zach Evans is pretty much the presumed starter, there is no guarantee that he's going to get the absolute bulk of the work. It would just make sense right now, but I would just be a little bit careful. This is not a situation where I think he's just an easy plug and play. Now, after the fact, it might be, but that's probably more so hindsight. I haven't projected for right around 10, 11 points, which looks good at $4,000. That's over 2x, but I'm just saying we should be a little bit careful. Heading back to our build here, I don't have any interest in the expensive running backs this week, so we're going to scroll down a little bit, probably live in the mid-range. Ken Walker's the easy plug and play, a little bit expensive at $7,000, but this is pretty much a dream spot here. Then Jahmyr Gibbs for the run back option with Lamar Jackson. I don't think we're going to be able to afford Amon-Ra St. Brown for this one, so I think Gibbs makes the most sense. And I also really like Isaiah Pacheco. So if I just go the 3 running back route off the rip, which is not really something I've done often this year, we'll try to see if we can afford it. But in the flex spot here, $6,100, let's just plug in Pacheco. And you just play at 4 o'clock, so that would make sense to have him in the flex spot there. I don't remember what time well, I guess they're both on the West Coast. So I'm sure he plays at 4 as well. So we're gonna roll with that for right now. We have 4,600 bucks left for the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 spots. So we should be able to do it. Like Zay Flowers is not that expensive, and Mark Andrews isn't either. So we're gonna try for the double stack, and then hopefully it all fits. And as for our wide receivers, again, long list, but don't make it complicated. Look at your quarterback. Find 1 to 2 pass catchers here, unless it involves the tight end. Then find one, and look at your game stack. Find a run back option. So for example, if I had Geno Smith, I have 3 wide open wide receiver slots. There's a lot of good wide receivers on this slate, so it's like, where do I start? Well, you already have 2 locked up because you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. You're throwing them in. Then your one run back option would make the most sense with Marquise Brown. There you go. You just fill out 3 spots. I'm not saying it's always that simple, but just for an example, that's how you simplify things and try to not make it overcomplicated for yourself when you're hand building. If you're using an optimizer, that'll figure it out for you. But if you're hand building, that's when you always make mistakes like that. So anyway, if you're using Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, those are your top 2 options. I realize it's pretty expensive, but the ball is going 2 places in that offense, especially with no Kyron Williams. It's going to Cooper Kupp and it's going to Puka Nacua. And the rumors of Cooper Kupp going on the IR for the rest of the season, re-aggravating his hamstring instantly, well, we can put it to bed for now. I'm not saying it can't come back, but the dude looks good. He looks healthy, and he is back to destroying defenses. And we'll probably see the same thing this week versus Pittsburgh, who was allowing the 4th most points per game, 2 wide receivers, and both him and Puka make for excellent options, in my opinion. Puka, while he didn't have a great week last week, keep in mind the Rams didn't really have to throw the ball in the second half, and he did drop a touchdown, so the opportunity was still there, but I'm willing to go right back to the well. Keenan Allen, obviously fine for a run back option with Chief stacks, or if you're using Justin Herbert, he would be the main threat there. And then also Joshua Palmer, his price point solidified himself as the wide receiver 2 in that offense. Quentin Johnson, the rookie, just not really relevant whatsoever. So Palmer at that price point would make for a pretty popular play this week, I think. Finding cash games, but obviously fine for tournaments as well. In this specific stack, Amon-Ra St. Brown would make a lot of sense. The only downside would be the price tag. That's the toughest part there. I don't really have any interest in Jared Goff. So pretty much either as a one-off, although that's one expensive one-off, and plus the Ravens versus quarterbacks have been really tough this year. I think Jared Goff could struggle this week. Metcalf and Lockett, we did talk about. Zay Flowers for our lineup right now. He's going to make it 30% target share and definitely solidified himself as the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Close to 8 targets per game, 6 catches, 60 yards. Definitely going to look pretty solid here. And the Lions are pretty much mid-pack versus wide receivers this season, ranking 19th versus the position. Christian Watson, if you were rolling out Jordan Love, I think Watson has to be your number 1 stacking option there. Decent team total for the Green Bay Packers. And while Love is obviously not the best quarterback out there, there's big play upside with Christian Watson. Smaller sample size for him this year, but a 44% market share. Other teams' air yards and an ADOT of 18.2. Marquise Brown, one of the best plays on the slate. Fine for cash games. Drake London. I haven't really talked about this game in general. I think it's just going to be kind of ugly and sloppy. 37.5 point over under, which I believe is the lowest on the slate. Only a 17.5 implied team total. But the Buccaneers are 25th versus wide receivers. Tough to run on them. And while they're still going to use Bijan Robinson, they're still going to run the ball. I do think Drake London can have success at his price point. Joshua Palmer we talked about, fine for cash games. Rashee Rice, if you're trying to double stack with Mahomes, I know it's easy just to play Travis Kelce, but Rashee Rice is fine if you want to add him in there. I think he's the best wide receiver in that offense, the one I would trust the most. Kendrick Bourne, while I hate playing any Patriots and I don't really have any interest in this game whatsoever, it only has 16-point implied team total. I mean, that's really low. But I think he's fine from a volume standpoint. My projections don't hate him. 21% target share, 8 out of 12, 7.5 targets per game. He's fine. We've seen double-digit target games from Kendrick Bourne this season, so he's okay. They're going to be trailing. Should be a positive game script. And then if you're looking for a cheap option, don't really see anybody I like in the bare minimum 3K range. But Wanda Robinson just below 4K. He sees consistent targets every single week, 21% target share. Is not used down the field, but for PPR site like DraftKings, if you're trying to get some quick points on catches, when you're getting pretty much 5 points a game just based off of catches and you get your 30 yards. So I don't think you'll find the end zone, but there's always a chance for it. But I'm fine with Wandale. It's a good matchup versus the Commanders. They really struggled versus receivers this season. And they were the team that got absolutely blown up by DJ Moore. Though they did bench the guy that was guarding him, but still overall, I think this is a defense that we can exploit. And back to our build here. So there's only one stacking option I like at the wide receiver position with Lamar Jackson, and that's very clearly Zay Flowers at $5,700. After that, I'm not sure exactly where I want to go. Now, I do know that I'll be playing Mark Andrews, so a little bit of a spoiler there, but I think we have to play him with Lamar since we're going with that stack. So if we just pre-put him in here, that leaves us with just under $4,000 left for 3 spots. Factor in that we can use a cheap defense, so that probably puts us mid-ish, below 4K range for our remaining salaries, which Obviously, he's not going to give us too much of the receiver position, but I still think we can field together a halfway decent lineup. And everybody's favorite part, tight ends and defenses. I got to tell you, tight end position sucks this week. If you were not playing the 3 studs, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta, punt with Zach Ertz. He's in a good spot versus a pretty bad pass defense so far this season. He gets opportunity, 20% target share. But outside of that, if you just can't fit any of these guys we're talking about, just play somebody random that runs routes and he's going to be on the field and he gets opportunity because that's all we can ask for. But Kelce, step above the field here, 9.2 targets per game, over 7 catches, 26% target share. Mark Andrews, a 24% target share, and Sam Laporta, a 22% target share. And also Sam Laporta, I kind of always forget about him when I'm talking as bring back options on line stacks, but you can throw him in there as well. But with Lamar, you're playing Mark Andrews, so I don't really want to go double tight end. But yeah, not much to say here about the tight ends. It's just they're all really gross this week outside of these 4. And the defenses, you guys know what I do. I scroll all the way down and find the first one that looks halfway viable, looking at their implied team totals. So number 1 for me, Chiefs, Ravens. I think both of those are fine. If you are doing a Chiefs stack, it wouldn't make too much sense to do a Chiefs defense because you're obviously hoping that it's a high-scoring game. The Ravens, while I do like them, I think they're probably the cashy defense of the week. I'm going with a stack of this game, so I don't really want to do the Baltimore defense. But we don't have a Chiefs stack, and we have Isaiah Pacheco, so honestly, the Chiefs defense wouldn't be a bad pull here. And then obviously Giants, Bears, Falcons, all sloppy games. Browns defense versus Gardner Minshew's in play, but I really just pick one that's random and hope they don't blow up. All right, so let's finish this lineup off. Let's just throw in the Chiefs defense because we need to go cheap here, and it makes sense with Pacheco. We have $4,600 left for our last 2 spots, which they're both going to be wide receivers. So honestly, I don't mind the range we're in, to be honest. Like if we wanted to go the Drake London route at $5,100, we have $4,100 left, and we could play a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, who I said the target's very consistent, 5, 6, 6, 8. It's not going to add up to too many points, but it's consistent enough to where I'm fine with it at his cheap price point. If you wanted to save a little bit of money and go more balanced, or if you wanted to play Joshua Palmer, I realize we have our Chiefs defense here, but just for the sake of looking at Palmer because he's going to be very popular, that leaves us $4,400. You could go with Kendrick Bourne route, who I did talk about. The targets are there. 11, 5, 3 wasn't great, 5, but 9 versus Miami. Like he's not an exciting play, but there's potential there. So really just looking at 2 cheap 4K wide receivers. There's several. Curtis Samuel's even viable. Josh Downs, Dotson, Rashee Rice, if I didn't already have the Chiefs defense and Isaiah Pacheco, but a pretty good looking build. So we have Lamar Jackson double stack with Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Ram back with Jahmyr Gibbs. We have Ken Walker, Isaiah Pacheco, Chiefs defense, which also correlates. And then whoever you want to throw in cheap at the wide receiver position, that's not a bad way to go. Like I said, just went on the optimizer here to see who is popping the most as of right now. And if you're wondering, yes, these are my projections and my optimizer. You can't really find it anywhere else. So what I did was I just put in a little bit of randomness, so they're not the exact projections, and then I just put stacking options on there, so we should have at least 1 pass catcher with a run back option in every single build here, and I had this running while we were recording everything else. So let's pop up the lineups here and put the players tab and see who is getting jammed in right now. So Kenneth Walker getting a lot of love there, which is going to lead to that extremely high ownership projection that I have right now. Maybe that's a bit aggressive. It's only Friday morning, so obviously these are going to change a little bit by the time Sunday rolls around, but I understand it. Aaron Jones, if he plays, looks like my projections like him. At least that batch of randomness on that projection run, I guess. Zach Ertz, Jerome Ford, Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, Kendrick Bourne, Pacheco. Dobbs is popping a lot up at quarterback, which I guess I get because it likes that game quite a bit. But overall, I am not really too surprised that the players it's popping. If we're looking at the teams, Seattle, Arizona, KC, Green Bay, Cleveland, Los Angeles, the games, Seattle. Like these are going to be definitely the top 2 options, like game-wise, ownership-wise. And then I can definitely see Denver and Green Bay popping up quite a bit as well. So it's really no surprise that these 3 games right here are just getting absolutely jammed in lineup. So this should give you guys a good, like, general sense of who's going to be popular on this slate, because I can't imagine I'm too far off of what everybody else is having and everybody else is doing. They're just running optimizers and just looking at everybody else's top plays. So I'd expect this to pretty much beat the chalk here. Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones might be a bit aggressive. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised he popped up that much. But like Jerome Ford, Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, Pacheco, these guys will all definitely have ownership. With that being said, guys, that's all I got for today's video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'm more than happy to answer you. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.